Who ran the 10K here? I know there is one hand, but wow. You know, running the 10K and making it here, I see that as a compliment. 2012, on the most influential women, she was ranked ahead of Sonia Gandhi, ahead of, I think, Hillary Clinton, and so on and so forth. And she was so mortified with embarrassment that they would do that to her. But in any case, so a grand keynote is sort of a, embarrassing moment, because I'm sure it's hard to live up to that expectation for any of us. So please don't expect that. I think that the take I have is slightly different. As I was thinking about women in technology, I happen to be in a somewhat of a reflective mood, and that has to always do with looking back versus looking ahead. So I think I have something to say about looking back, maybe not as much to say about looking ahead, and we have a great panel here, and they'll cover that. And the presentation comes up where? Oh, over there. Okay. No, not yet here, but that's okay. Okay. So, so I was thinking, is there anything new to say in this? At least with all my women colleagues, I feel like we have talked about it, looked at it from 360 degrees. We have looked at it from every dimension that we can talk about it. And sometimes the answers are obvious and they're repeated. We have discussed them. And many times the answers are not as obvious, and hence also you discuss them. So I don't feel like the topic has anything new, but it's always good to talk about topics over and over again, because progress comes from small slivers, not from necessarily always grand leaps. So I wanted to kind of start at the beginning, right, in a sense. We are all shaped by the past, and, let's see if this works. Sorry. There's only 5 slides. If it's hard, I'll just tell you, you can, forward it, not a problem. So today, since we are talking about women and technology, women in corporate, women in business, business itself is very much a ethos of the Western thought, how we think about it today. And Western thought has really been shaped by key philosophers of their past and their legacy. So a little bit of, hopefully, some humor in this. But what do the great philosophers that have shaped the thinking of today's corporate world, in a way, think about women? I don't need to read it out. You can sort of. So what does it say? Well, women are less than men, and maybe they're even unnecessary. And the corollary to this from an Indian thought would be, everything that's good about a man is led by the women. Everything that's bad about a man is also because of the women, right? So, you have praise and condemnation in the sort of same breath. So that's the legacy with which women have to, from a backdrop that we have to think through when we think about the past and hence about the future, right? So with that sort of beginning, so why does it matter? Why does it matter today for me to talk about it? Because anytime there's a session about women and so forth, it sort of becomes very passé to want to talk about it, because each of us want to be defined by who we are, which is bigger than being a woman. And I think for a long, long time, for me it was about, look, I haven't faced any hurdles. I don't feel like I am discriminated. I don't feel like I'm handicapped to succeed and achieve my goals. And that would be sort of the recipe I would try to sell anyone who wanted any advice or mentoring. But as I reflect about it, to me, I think each of us have our experiences. Perhaps it is true that for a set of circumstances or choices, I feel empowered, but it's also statistics don't necessarily support that, and hence I think talking about the experiences that haven't allowed others to do that and reflecting on what does it take for women to succeed in technology, I think is quite apt. And it's quite apt, at least in my case, because you know, there are men and women here. If you have daughters, how many of you would like to see them in tech if that were to be their choice? You know, so you do that for that. The reason you talk about these things has to do with helping the future generation. Maybe we can't, and we have to reflect on the past sometimes to fix the future. So women of vision, you know, we are here talking, but when we talk about women in tech, I thought a little bit of nostalgia to something is very, very important. These 4 women were a part of a group who built the first, earliest computer. Their history is unknown, unwritten. There is a very interesting documentary about their life, which is not easily accessible, but you know, worth seeing. And maybe someday GSF should project it or something like that in a Women in Tech session, and it says it all. But these women built the first computer. So women of vision, women that are pioneering. However, like I said, they were never introduced to the world. So they are really unknown. And this picture, when it surfaced, it was written up that these women were the refrigerator girls. What that meant was women that are just used to pose for products. And so that's sort of the legacy we come from, right? Even if you achieved, you never got credit. And that legacy sort of continues. And so I thought, you know, we should just talk about that. And some of these women, all of them have passed away now, but when later they were interviewed, they also didn't see anything wrong, that they together created the first computer, and the world doesn't know about it, and their male colleagues took the credit for it, and they were just glad to have had the opportunity to work on something that you know, allowed them to be pioneers. And if they didn't get the credit, you know, that's just the way it is, right? So that's also the legacy for women in technology. Just as a check, had any of you heard of the ENIAC project and the first computer? And I saw 1 hand, 2 hand. Well, at least there are 4 or 5 people who seem to have known about it. That's probably a higher percentage average than if you sort of looked at it from a you know, broader percentage of people who know that the first computer was actually put together by a group of women. This is only a small sliver. It's data that we all know. You know, so one of the things that you can't you know, avoid if you are a woman is look at what are all the multiple roles women in technology or a career woman has to struggle with. And there is some corollary data to this, so as to not spend time on the data, but to make the point. So you can see that, and you extrapolate this to women married with children. On an average, a man spends no more than 10 hours on, you know, ancillary housework, and the women's role in that is more or less paritable when they're single, but when they're married, it exponentially goes up, and when they are sort of have children, it goes off the charts. So from talking about women in technology or women anywhere, you know, that can't be ignored, right? So the struggle continues, even though there is celebration that is warranted for progress. So if you look at women in technology from very small, abysmal single digits, today, you know, 16 to 20% of women enter into engineering colleges, and the workforce, I mean, it's not 50-50, but it's not bad. 25% of women are employed in the IT workforce. So that's the reason to at least celebrate. But the reason not to celebrate is when you look at that from percentage of women that go into senior positions, that is still nothing to talk home about. And you know, I was just amused as I was thinking about this topic. Just, I think, a couple of months back, in some article in Times of India, you know, there was this stereotypical article again, how women are horrible bosses and no woman wants to work for another woman. And, you know, and I'm sure many of you have heard this. And I think these are the stereotypical myths, because I firmly believe it's a myth. There are good bosses, there are bad bosses. And I think if you looked at that, they'll all come by equal gender percentages. So, but this myth continues and is perpetuated all the time. So the struggle continues for women to talk about how do you succeed in tech, because we are not talking about merit here. I think we assume that merit exists. So the topics that need to be discussed is beyond merit, what then holds women back from being able to succeed. So I think most of you agree that inherently there is this notion that women take care and men take charge, right? And however amusing that is, and you know, and then the tightrope walk is a everyday occurrence, right? And I thought that what would be apt is, and most of you know this probably, but the Howard versus Heidi experiment that was conducted. How many of you know about this? Right, so a few. So allow me to just share. This business school professor wrote up a case, a real life case, or a real life resume of someone who worked for Apple as a visionary, was a successful entrepreneur, and became a successful venture capitalist, and had an aggressive personality, was a consummate social networker, and put that down and said, this resume, what do you think of this person? Half the class was given, the resume was exactly the same. The name was Howard Roizen, and the second half got Heidi Roizen. And they were asked to vote on a few parameters, or they were asked to mark on a few parameters. One was, do you think this person is competent? I think there was no gender bias there. But then, when it came to, you know, how do you classify this person, Howard was looked on as a great employee, someone you'd love to have on your team, on your staff, so on and so forth. Remember, the resume was exactly the same. Only the name was switched by gender. And then Heidi, who was actually the real character, this resume was Heidi Roizen's resume. And, you know, the thing that got most votes was she sounds really selfish, and because, you know, obviously she's a consummate networker, is never home, whatever the reasons may be. But, and she's not the type of person that you really want on your team or you want to work for. And this is a real case, right? And so I think these are moments of reflection that are important. So in Cheryl's Lean In, she says, you know, when a man is successful, he is well liked. When a woman does well, people, you know, don't think that is something to celebrate, right? So what do you do? I think there are two things. One is either we continue to work on the perception problem, and we need to do that, and they happen through conversations. They don't happen through, how should I say, feminist agitations. They probably happen through collective dialogue, through collective reflection. And the second thing is to not bother, right? And this is especially hard for women, which maybe men grasp or don't, because in general, I think when I look across the board at women, they actually want to be liked. There is something about cultural upbringing or DNA or whatever. You know, it's all great for a Larry Ellison to have a Playboy image and hence actually be the qualification to continue as a CEO. There is no way that a woman can you know, that type of image would be acceptable to a women leader, right? So there is fundamental challenges to how a successful woman doesn't get supported in subtle ways. This is not about childcare. This is not about, you know, chores at home. It is something more than that, right? So I thought that since the panel is going to actually talk about data in the future, I wanted to set the scope about, you know, a past and a reflection maybe that allows us to talk beyond how do you get more people into computer science and math in K to 12, how do you ensure that there is right mentoring for women to succeed, and so on and so forth. But I think all of those are necessary, but moments of reflection are far more necessary, I feel. So look, I'm an optimist, a cheerleader. I have to be that at home. I have to be that at work. So, you know, there's always a question of can women be this or that or whatever. So I just sort of had, you know, my takeaways that I just wanted to lead or leave. And all of that to just conclude to say the, you know, only thing I would offer my daughters would be comfortable to be yourself, right? So that's all I have to say, and we'll welcome the panel next. Thank you.